The quiet air around the historic tomb was always filled with discipline, silence, and respect. Tourists walked carefully, whispering to each other, as the tomb guard stood motionless in his perfect stance, his uniform shining under the sun, and his rifle held like an extension of his very body. His presence alone reminded everyone that this was not just stone and marble, but sacred ground, a place where heroes rested and tradition was guarded with unbreakable honor. But that calm afternoon took a sharp turn when a group of rowdy men, loud and mocking, approached the area. They weren't ordinary visitors. Their swagger showed arrogance, their smirks showed disrespect, and their eyes held a challenge. They wanted attention, they wanted to show off, and in their ignorance, they thought they could belittle the guard who had sworn to protect the tomb with his life. One of them laughed too loudly, another shouted a disrespectful comment, and then suddenly, before anyone could predict it, they rushed toward the guard. Tourists gasped, cameras lifted, but the guard did not flinch. He followed the sacred code, no reaction unless absolutely necessary. But the men crossed the line, grabbing his arms, pulling handcuffs from a pocket, and with force, they locked the cold metal around his wrists. Gasps echoed through the crowd. A tomb guard, bound in chains. It was unthinkable. The men laughed like hyenas, thinking they had humiliated him, thinking they had proved some twisted point. But in truth, they had triggered something far beyond their control. At first, the guard stood in silence, his face stone cold, his body unyielding. Even cuffed, he radiated authority that unsettled even the bravest in the crowd. The men mocked louder, parading around him, shouting that he was just a statue in uniform, powerless without his weapon, powerless without freedom of his arms. They didn't understand that a guard's strength did not come from the rifle, nor the stance, but from discipline, training, and an unbreakable spirit. The disrespect was spreading like poison in the air. Families with children began moving back, elders shook their heads in disbelief, and the atmosphere that was once sacred was now polluted by laughter and mockery. Security personnel nearby froze, unsure whether to step in or wait for command, but before they could act, a ripple moved through the crowd. A commanding voice thundered, not loud in volume, but heavy with authority, a voice that cut through arrogance like a blade through silk. "Release him." The words carried no hesitation. All eyes turned, and from the side of the tomb steps, a man in full military uniform emerged. His presence silenced the laughter instantly. The insignia on his chest glinted in the sunlight. He was no ordinary officer, he was a colonel. The crowd seemed to breathe again, and even the cocky intruders shifted uneasily. This was no longer their little game. The colonel's boots struck the ground with deliberate rhythm as he approached. His eyes locked onto the men who had dared to humiliate the guard, and though he spoke calmly, his tone carried the weight of battlefield command. "Do you know where you stand? Do you know what you've just done?" he asked, his voice sharper than steel. The men tried to laugh it off, shrugging, pretending they were untouchable, but their laughter cracked under the colonel's stare. He stepped closer, his chest nearly touching the leader of the group, and repeated, slower this time, "Do you understand the ground beneath your feet is sacred?" The leader scoffed, saying they were just having fun, that the guard was nothing more than a performer. The colonel's jaw tightened, but instead of striking out, he gestured to the guard, still standing tall with cuffs digging into his wrists. "This man you mock has sworn an oath stronger than your entire existence. He would stand here in the freezing rain, in the blazing heat, even in the face of danger, without flinching, because respect to the fallen is his duty." The tourists watched in awe, some even recording, knowing they were witnessing a moment that would not be forgotten. The colonel then leaned in, voice low but piercing, "You think you cuffed a man. What you cuffed was honor itself. And dishonor always carries consequences." The atmosphere thickened, heavy with tension. The men shifted nervously now, their arrogance slipping like sand through clenched fists. The colonel raised his hand, and with one swift motion, 2 soldiers from nearby security rushed forward. Their precision was military sharp. In seconds, the men who had cuffed the guard found their arms twisted behind their backs. The same cold cuffs they had used in mockery now snapped around their own wrists, and the irony was not lost on anyone watching. The crowd erupted in murmurs, some clapping quietly, others nodding in silent approval. The guard, still cuffed, remained silent, his discipline unbroken, but his eyes reflected gratitude and steel. The colonel gave a small nod to the soldiers, and with a key, they unlocked the cuffs from the guard's wrists. The sound of the click, metal falling to the stone ground, echoed like a victory drum. The guard adjusted his uniform calmly, lifted his rifle back into position, and returned to his post as if nothing had happened. That single act of composure struck the crowd harder than any lecture ever could. The colonel turned back to the restrained troublemakers, his expression calm but unyielding. You came here thinking you could disrespect, thinking you could play games. But this place is not for your amusement, it is for remembrance. And today you will learn the difference between arrogance and honor. His words were not for the men alone, but for everyone present, a reminder carved into the very air. He ordered the intruders escorted out, their laughter gone, their eyes downcast, shame replacing their earlier boldness. As they were dragged away, the colonel stood firm, watching until the sacred silence returned to the grounds. The guard, standing at his post once again, seemed taller than ever, his figure a living statue of resilience. Families stepped forward, whispering to their children about what they had just witnessed, telling them this was why respect mattered, this was why honor was not a costume but a code. The story of that day would spread far beyond those walls, carried by every witness, every recording, every retelling. Because on that day, they cuffed a tomb guard, but in the end, it was a colonel who taught them, and everyone watching, an unforgettable lesson.